Good morning, everyone. This is Craig Brown, Vice President, Producer Affairs with the National Cotton Council. I'd like to welcome everyone to the National Cotton Council's conference call and webinar regarding the recently passed seed cotton program. With the new program taking effect for this year's crop, we felt that it was important to disseminate the information as quickly as possible, and conducting a series of calls and webinars is the best way to do that. By way of background, you will recall that on February the 9th, Congress passed a budget agreement that included supplemental disaster provisions for agriculture. In addition, the legislation included the seed cotton program as well as provisions to improve the safety net for dairy. I would remind everyone that this conference call lines are in lecture mode until the time for questions and answers following the presentations. You can also download the presentations or a summary from our website. Further, the seed cotton program represents the culmination of more than 2 years of concerted effort by the U.S. cotton industry to improve the support program by authorizing cotton's eligibility for the PLC and ARC programs within the 2014 Farm Bill. I want to recognize the diligent efforts of the staff of the National Cotton Council, as well as the numerous cotton industry associations that worked hard to achieve this outcome. Dedicated industry leadership was also critically important in these efforts, and to those I offer my thanks. Achieving this new policy would not have been possible without the tireless efforts of Congressman Mike Conaway, Chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and Senator Thad Cochran, Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. The industry is also very grateful for key members across the Cotton Belt for their efforts as well. Before we review the program, let me address the importance of establishing a seed cotton policy in advance of the new Farm Bill and why it was necessary to convert generic base beginning in 2018 rather than 2019. Cotton producers needed an improved safety net as soon as possible, and the Supplemental Disaster Bill was the last legislative vehicle to accomplish that outcome. The Supplemental Disaster Bill provided an opportunity to add additional baseline funding through the changes for dairy and cotton. Adding new money would not have been possible in the Farm Bill process, and addressing cotton and dairy now will make the upcoming Farm Bill development a bit less difficult. Generic base acres are cotton base from the previous Farm Bill and were intended as a temporary measure to keep some support on those acres until a new cotton policy was implemented in Title I. The conversion of generic base in 2018, 1 year ahead of the new Farm Bill, helped ensure the budget resources currently associated with generic base would remain within the new cotton program and with other crops that establish base acres by converting generic base to crop-specific bases. If development of the cotton policy and conversion of generic base occurred in the context of the upcoming Farm Bill debate, there would have been many more interest involved who would want a portion of the generic base acre payments to go to their priorities instead. Strengthening the cotton program and converting generic base so that all payment acres are now decoupled from plantings should make it easier to defend and maintain the support levels and payment limit provisions that are critically important to Southern agriculture. With the approval of the provisions for cotton and dairy, the Agriculture Committees are in much better position to move forward with the development of the new Farm Bill. In the upcoming Farm Bill, cotton will be focused on maintaining the seed cotton policy. Our industry is also seeking some improvements to the operation of the marketing loan, enhancements in cotton flow, and increasing support for the textile industry of the United States. We anticipate the House Agriculture Committee will try to pass their version of the new Farm Bill out of committee by the end of the first quarter of this year. The Senate Agriculture Committee is likely to follow shortly thereafter. The committee bills must then be approved by their respective bodies and then work out any differences in conference. This needs to occur by September 30th, when the provisions of the existing Farm Bill begin to expire. Given the numerous attacks on agriculture policy by outside interest groups from across the political spectrum, it is critical that all of U.S. agriculture work together to defend the Farm Bill. Let me thank you for your participation in the conference call and webinar. Thank you to those that are hosting groups at your office. To give us an idea of the number of people that we reach, I would ask those of you with groups to give a rough idea of the number at your location by typing the number of attendees into the webinar's chat window. I'll remind you we will take questions at the end of the presentation with the webinar chat window first, and then open the conference lines. If you have any follow-up questions or need additional information after the webinar, you are always welcome to contact your NCC Member Services representative or contact myself or any of the staff in the Memphis or Washington office. I will now introduce Dr. Jody Campeachy, the Council Vice President of Economic and Policy Analysis, for today's presentation. Jody?
Okay, so we'll cover the 2018 Seed Cotton Program information. And just as a reminder, the information presented today is based on our review of the legislative language. Final details are subject to change based on USDA's interpretation of language and implementation. Seed cotton is designated as a covered commodity eligible for Title I, PLC, and ART programs in the 2014 Farm Bill, beginning with the 2018 crop. Seed cotton refers to unginned upland cotton that includes both lint and cotton seed. The reference price is set at 36.7 cents per pound. The price floor is set at 25 cents per pound. The seed cotton marketing or average price is a weighted average of the upland cotton lint price and the cottonseed price. The lint and cottonseed prices are weighted based on annual shares of production. So we take the U.S. upland cotton lint production times the U.S. upland cotton lint marketing or average price plus U.S. cottonseed production times U.S. cottonseed marketing or average price, and we divide that by upland cotton lint production plus U.S. cotton production. The marketing or average price is not final until the end of the marketing year. The marketing year runs from August 1st to July 31st. USDA publishes monthly estimates throughout the marketing year. And once we get into the 2018-19 marketing year, we will post a document on our website that tracks the monthly prices so you can get an idea of where the seed cotton marketing or average price will be for each year. USDA generally publishes the final prices in late September or early October of each year. So let's go through an example of calculating the seed cotton marketing or average price. The upland cotton lint price in our example will be 69 cents. The upland cotton marketing or cottonseed marketing or average price is $150 a ton. To get U.S. upland cotton lint production, we take the number of bales, multiply that by 480 pounds per bale, and then we get the pounds of cotton lint production. Cottonseed production is reported in tons, so we convert the tons to pounds, and then we add the two together, and now we have total U.S. cotton lint and cottonseed production in pounds. So to get the seed cotton marketing or average price, we just plug in the numbers into the formula. And if you go down to the very bottom line, after we go through those calculations, you can see that we have a weight of 0.4233 for lint. We multiply that by the lint price of 69 cents. We add to that the cottonseed weight of 0.5767 times the cottonseed price, and we get a seed cotton marketing average price of 33.53 cents. And this will change each year because we'll have different prices and we'll have different production. It's U.S. production of lint and cottonseed for each year. And of course, as we track this throughout the year, this will change monthly until we have the final estimate at the end of the marketing year. This chart shows historical lint prices, cottonseed prices, and seed cotton prices. So seed cotton would be the blue line in the middle. So as you can see, it's a combined price of cottonseed and lint. Now if you take a look at the 2017 value, which you can't see 17 on the axis there, but it's right past 16. So for 16 to 17, the lint price increased a bit. From 16 to 17, the cottonseed price decreased a bit. And as you can see, the seed cotton price actually drops from 16 to 17. Now the other thing to point out is the reference price and then the price floor. So if you look at the green dotted line, that's actually the reference price. I can see that it says reference floor on the chart. So that's 36.7 cents. And in most years, except for about, let's see, 2010 to 2013, the seed cotton marketing average price was actually below the reference price. So the price floor of 25 cents would set the bottom of where the seed cotton price would go for the payment. So, of course, if the seed cotton price is less than the price floor of 25 cents, in the calculation, we would use the price floor. Okay, so to walk through an example, this spreadsheet is available on our website. And you can go look at it a little more closely because I know there are a lot of numbers. But let's take a look at where we would get the seed cotton marketing or average price at different levels of lint prices and cottonseed prices. So the example that we just worked through, can't get that out, we had 69 cents for a lint marketing average price. We had $150 a ton for the cottonseed marketing average price. You go on the chart where the two meet up, and it's 33.53 cents. Now let's say that the lint price drops to 61 cents, and the cottonseed marketing average price is still $150 a ton. So you can see a seed cotton marketing average price of 0.301, or about 30 cents. Now, on this chart, you can look across and see any of the values that are lower than the reference price of 36.7 would imply a cottonseed PLC payment. Okay, now let's look at the seed cotton payment yield. So the seed cotton yield would be the lint yield plus the cottonseed yield. This is also equal to 2.4 times the lint yield. Since the cottonseed yield is determined as 1.4 times the lint yield, and we use the 1.4 conversion factor because this is consistent with the approach in crop insurance. The upland cotton lint payment yield is equal to the higher of the CCP lint yield or the updated lint yield. There's a one-time opportunity to update the payment yield for upland cotton based on 90% of the average of 2008 to 2012 actual yields, not counting years in which cotton was not grown. And this is consistent with what the other commodities had the option to do in the 2014 Farm Bill implementation. So let's look at a seed cotton payment yield example. We'll assume that the cotton lint yield is equal to 800 pounds per acre. To get the pounds of cottonseed, we take 1.4 times 800. We get 1,120 pounds per acre. To get the seed cotton payment yield, we take 800 plus 1,120, and we get 1,920 pounds per acre. This is also equal to 2.4 times 800. So the seed cotton payment is made when the reference price exceeds the higher of the marketing average price and the price floor. The seed cotton PLC payment rate is equal to the reference price minus the higher of the marketing average price and the price floor. The seed cotton payment rate would be 0 if the seed cotton marketing average price is greater than the reference price of 36.7 cents. So the seed cotton PLC payment is paid on 85% of the farm's decoupled seed cotton base. The seed cotton PLC payment would be equal to the PLC payment rate times the payment yield times 85%. And just to reiterate, this is consistent with the PLC program for other covered commodities in the 2014 Farm Bill. Okay, walking through an example, we use the seed cotton marketing or average price that we calculated a few slides back of 33.53 cents. To get the seed cotton PLC payment rate, we take the reference price of 36.7 minus the higher of 33.53 or the price floor of 25 cents, and we get the payment rate. We multiply the payment rate times the payment pounds, which is 1,920, times 85%, and we get $51.73 per acre. And that would be on the bottom line. But I want to go back to the third line on here where we calculated the seed cotton maximum payment. So under this price scenario, the maximum payment that would be made would be the reference price of 36.7 cents minus the price floor of 25 cents times 1,920 pounds times 85%, and that would be $190.94 per base acre. And again, that is the maximum payment. The actual payment under this price situation would be $51.73. Okay, now let's talk about the Seed Cotton ARC County program. The ARC County program provides revenue loss coverage at the county level. ARC County payments are issued when the actual county seed cotton revenue is less than the ARC County guarantee. Okay, the ARC County guarantee is equal to 86% times the benchmark revenue. The benchmark revenue is equal to the U.S. benchmark seed cotton marketing average price times the benchmark seed cotton yield. To get the benchmark seed cotton marketing average price, it is the average of the previous 5 years seed cotton marketing average price, and we exclude the years with the highest and lowest price, and this is also just the Olympic average. If the marketing average price in any of those 5 years is lower than the reference price, the reference price of 36.7 is substituted for the marketing year average price. Okay, the benchmark seed cotton yield equals the average of the previous 5 years county seed cotton yield. We exclude the years with the highest and lowest yield, and again, this would be the Olympic average. If the county yield in any of the 5 years is lower than 70% of the county T yield, 70% of the county T yield is substituted. So to get the actual revenue, we take the U.S. seed cotton marketing average price for that year and multiply that by the seed cotton yield. The maximum ARC County payment is equal to 10% times the benchmark revenue. So to get the revenue shortfall, we take the ARC County guarantee minus the actual revenue. The ARC County payment per base acre is equal to the lower of the maximum ARC County payment or the revenue shortfall times 85%. And just to be clear, on the ARC County program, the payment is limited to 10% times the benchmark revenue. So what you'll find when you're comparing ARC to PLC is you will see the PLC payments will generally be, the maximum PLC payment will generally be higher than the maximum ARC County payment. Okay, so looking at an example ARC County calculation. Okay, so we'll do this example for the 2017-18 crop year. So we take the seed cotton marketing average price for 2012 through 2016. So that would be the previous 5 years. And we calculate the seed cotton marketing average price like I showed you earlier. I just didn't put all the calculations on here. And for any of those years where the price is below the reference price of 36.7, we substitute the reference price. So you can see 14, 15, and 16, we would use .367 there instead of the actual seed cotton marketing average price. So we take the Olympic average of those 5, which basically means we drop the highest and the lowest, we average the remaining 3, and we get .3689. And then we'll use the price we calculated earlier for 2017 of 33.53 cents. And then, of course, we have the county seed cotton yield per acre. And again, this will vary by county. These are just some assumptions that I put in here. We take the Olympic average of those 5 years, and we get 2,040 pounds per acre. And for 17-18, I used a seed cotton yield of 1,920 pounds per acre. And again, this will vary. To look at different ARC payments, you would need to put in, different county seed cotton yields. You could lower that and see what the payment might be. So the benchmark revenue per acre would be the benchmark price, which was .3689, times the benchmark yield, which is 2,040. You get $752.57 per acre. The ARC County guarantee is going to be the benchmark revenue times 86%. So it's $647.21 per acre. Okay, now we need to calculate the actual revenue. So we're going to use the seed cotton marketing average price, 33.53 cents, times the seed cotton yield. And this is, in this example, this is going to be the actual yield. This is not your CCP yield. Your CCP yield is not used for ARC. And we get $643.87. So the maximum ARC County payment would be 10% times the benchmark revenue that I showed you on the previous slide. So it would be $75.26 per acre. So no matter how low the price is or how low the yield is, the maximum amount that you could get under ARC, under this example, would be $75.26. So now we calculate the revenue shortfall. And it's going to be $647.21. I'm going to go back a slide so we can look at that at the bottom. That's the ARC County guarantee. It's $647.21 minus the actual revenue. And the actual revenue that we calculated at the top of this slide is $643.87. So the shortfall is $3.34. So this is the other thing to remember about ARC, that the ARC County guarantee is 86% of the benchmark revenue, which means that you have to have a loss. You have to get down to at least 86% until it's going to kick in. Now, the ARC County payment per base acre is going to be the minimum of the $334 that we just calculated, and then, of course, the maximum ARC County payment. So in this case, it would be $3.34 times 85% of base acres, and that would be $2.84. So you'd be comparing this to the PLC payment of $51 that we just calculated. But again, keep in mind, Ark County also uses the county yield. So if the county yield ended up being lower than the 1,920 pounds that we used, then the Ark County payment could be higher. And I just want to remind you that the audio and the slides from this presentation will be on our website. The PowerPoint presentation will also be on the website. And there's also an Ark County example that goes through this same example, and it would probably help if you go back and review because it's a lot of calculations to get in your head. Okay, seed cotton base acres are established through the conversion of generic base acres. Generic base acres are not in effect beginning with the 2018 crop. For any farms with generic base and no covered commodities, including seed cotton, planted from 2009 to 2016, those generic base acres will become unassigned crop base and ineligible for PLC or ARC. Now, if 1 acre of one covered commodity is planted in any single year from 2009 to 2016, the generic base acres would still be eligible. And this does not affect existing base for other covered commodities. This is only applying to generic base. So producers will choose between option 1 or option 2 to convert generic base acres to seed cotton and other covered commodity base acres. Option 1, seed cotton base equals the higher of 2009 to 12 average seed cotton plantings, or 80% of generic base. And this cannot exceed total generic base. Any unconverted generic base becomes unassigned crop base and ineligible for PLC or ARC. Option 2, all generic base is converted proportionally based on 2009 to 12 average plantings of seed cotton and other covered commodities. Now, option 2 is consistent with the option available during the 2014 Farm Bill implementation. So the reason that you see the 2009 to 12 time period used for updating base and then the 2008 to 12 period for the yield update is because this is consistent with the choices available to other commodities in the 14 Farm Bill. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of examples. Example 1, let's assume a farm has 500 acres of generic base. 2009 to 12 average planted acres are cotton, 300 acres, corn, 200, peanuts, 200, soybeans, 100. So we have total covered commodities of 800 acres. Okay, so seed cotton base would equal the higher of 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres, which is 300, or 80% times the 500 generic base acres, which is 400. So seed cotton base would be 400. That's the higher number. Unassigned base would be 100, and this would be under option 1. The producer could also choose option 2. Okay, and for option 2, I'm going to walk through this, and then for the other examples, we won't go into so much detail. But okay, so here's how the 500 acres of generic base would be allocated. So we take the 4 crops, cotton, corn, peanuts, and soybeans that were planted or considered planted from 2009 to 2012. We take the average across the 4 years for each crop. One thing to point out is that you'll see for soybeans, there's 2 years, 2010 and 2012, where you see a 0. There were no soybeans planted. However, when we do the average, we calculate the average including the zeros. So it includes the years where soybeans weren't planted. So you'll see the average of the 150, 0, 250, and 0 is going to be 100. Okay, now to get the percentage planted of each covered commodity, we take the average number from 2009 to 2012, and we divide that by the total covered commodities planted during that time period. So for cotton, it was 300. We divide that by 800. We get 0.375. We do the same for corn, peanuts, and soybeans. Then we take each of those allocation percentages and we multiply that by the 500 acres of generic base. So for cotton, it's 500 times 0.375. You get 187.5 acres of seed cotton base. Corn, we take 0.25 times 500 and you get 125 acres of corn. Do the same for peanuts and soybeans, and you end up with 500 allocated base acres. There are no unassigned base acres in this example. So if a producer wanted additional base other than just seed cotton, so if a producer wanted more corn base or more soybean base, this would be the option to choose, so that would allow you to get more base of other covered commodities. Okay, example 2, 500 acres of generic base, 9 to 12 average planted acres, 200 cotton, 300 corn, 300 soybeans. Okay, option 1, 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres is 200. 80% times 500 generic base acres is 400. So seed cotton base would be 400, unassigned base would be 100. Or option 2, we would allocate it to cotton, corn, and soybeans. We planted 200 acres of cotton. We divide that by the 800 total covered commodities, and then multiply that percentage times the 500 generic base. So we end up with 125 cotton, 187.5 corn, and then 187.5 soybeans. So total allocated base would be 500 acres. There would be no unassigned base under option 2. Okay, example 3. Generic base of 500, 2009 to 12 average planted cotton, 500 acres, wheat 200, sorghum 100, for total covered commodities of 800 acres. Okay, option 1, 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres is 500. 80% times the 500 generic base is 400. So under this option, seed cotton base would be 500. Unassigned base would be 0. Under option 2, we would allocate the 500 acres of generic base to cotton, wheat, and sorghum, again based on the percentage planted of each commodity. We would end up with 312.5 cotton, 125 wheat, 62.5 sorghum, for total allocated base acres of 500. Example 4, total generic base of 500. 2009 to 12 average planted acres of cotton is 450, corn is 150, wheat is 200. So total covered commodities of 800 acres. Okay, option 1, 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres is 450. 80% times the 500 generic base is 400. So seed cotton base would be 450. Unassigned base would be 50. Under option 2, we allocate to cotton, corn, and wheat. So you have 281 acres of cotton, 93.75 acres of corn, 125 acres of wheat, for total allocated base of 500. Example 5. Total generic base is 500. From 9 to 12, the average planted cotton acres was 600. Corn was 200. Option 1. 2009 to 12, average planted cotton acres was 600. 80% of the 500 generic base acres is 400. Now, seed cotton base cannot be greater than generic base. So in this example, seed cotton base would be 500 instead of the 600 average planted cotton acres, because 500 would be the max. Unassigned base would be 0. Or option 2, allocate to cotton and corn. Okay, last example. Generic base of 500. 9 to 12 average planted cotton acres was 100. Corn was 100. And alfalfa, a non-covered commodity, is 600 acres. When we add total covered commodities, we get 200 acres because we only add the cotton and the corn. So 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres is 200. 80% of the 500 generic base acres is 400. Seed cotton base would be 400. Unassigned base would be 100. Or option 2, we allocate the 500 acres of generic base to cotton and corn. And even though only 200 acres of covered commodities was planted from 9 to 12, we still allocate the full 500 acres of generic base. So we take 100 cotton divided by the 200 total planted, multiply that by 500, we get 250 cotton acres, and do the same for corn. We get 250 corn acres. Total allocated base is 500. There would be no unassigned base. Okay, so to walk through a couple of examples where we calculate the PLC payments per base acre, I'm going to show you several different spreadsheets that show different lint payment yields. And you can see up at the top, you'll see lint payment yield, and in this example, it's 500, and it's in red. This spreadsheet is available on our website. You can go change, you can open it up, and all you have to do is change that lint payment yield to whatever you want to put in there, and it will recalculate for you. So to get the seed cotton payment yield, we take 500 times 2.4, and that would be 1,200 pounds per acre. Using the prices that we used earlier in our examples, we can look at a lint price of 69 cents and a cottonseed marketing average price of $150 a ton. And you can see a payment of $32 per base acre. And in this spreadsheet, this has already been multiplied by 85%, so you would just take the 32 times however many base acres that you have. And again, if the price dropped to 61 cents and the cottonseed marketing average price was $150 a ton, the payment would increase to $67 an acre. And if you look down towards the bottom and over towards the right, you'll see the zeros. And in those cells, you'll see that there's no PLC payment per base acre. So if we looked at where the lint marketing average price increased to 77 cents, but the cottonseed marketing average price stayed at 150, there would be 0 payment. And you can look at that all across the spreadsheet. You know, you can look at, let's look at 67 cents for a lint price and go over to $180 a ton for a cottonseed marketing average price. And we would have a payment of $32 per base acre. And again, that would be the same payment under our scenario of 69 cents and $150 a cottonseed price. So again, I encourage you to go to the website and download this spreadsheet so that you can look at it a little more closely. So increasing to 600 pounds for the lint payment yield, and again, that's multiplied by 2.4 to get the seed cotton payment yield of $1,440. You'll see a $39 per base acre payment with a 69-cent lint price and $150 a ton cottonseed price. Okay, moving to the next one, 700-pound lint payment yield. 700 times 2.4 would be 1,680 pounds for the seed cotton payment yield. With 69 cents for lint and $150 a ton for cottonseed, you'd see a payment of $45 an acre. Moving to 800 pounds for a lint payment yield. 69 cents and $150 a ton for cottonseed, you would have a payment of $52 per base acre. And I just want to be clear that this is just an example. These are not necessarily numbers predicting a payment for 2018. We wanted you to understand this so you could look at different price scenarios to see what the payments might be. Okay, 900 pounds of a lint payment yield at 69 cents for lint and $150 a ton for cottonseed, you would see a payment of $58 an acre. Lint payment yield of 1,000, the payment would be $65 per acre. Lint payment yield of 1,200, the payment would be $78 per base acre. And then a lint payment yield of 1,500, the payment would be $97 per base acre. Okay, moving on to other details. For the 2018 crop, a stacked insurance product may be purchased for acres of upland cotton planted on a farm enrolled in the Seed Cotton PLC or ARC program. Of course, stacks must be purchased prior to the sales closing date. The sales closing date, other than for South Texas, is approaching, and the prices right now, I think for the February 28th sales closing date, the price is already set at 75 cents. When I checked for the March 15th sales closing date, the price was at 76 cents, and it's still, the discovery period goes through February 28th. Now, after the 2018 crop, producers will have to choose to enroll in PLC or ARC or purchase stacks. You will not be able to have stacks and PLC or ARC on the same farm in the same acres. So it'll be a decision that is made every year. That's the intent of the legislation. Now, the non-recourse marketing assistance loan for upland cotton lint remains unchanged in the 2014 Farm Bill, with an upland cotton loan rate of 52 cents a pound for the 2018 crop. PLC and ARC payments for seed cotton are subject to the payment limit of $125,000, which also applies to other covered commodities other than peanuts. Okay, looking ahead, the decisions that need to be made, of course, will be to update payment yields, and that would be if the updated yield is greater than the CCP yield. If it's not, you would just keep the CCP yield. Choose between the base update options, and this is technically the landowner that must sign off on these decisions. So if you remember back to the 14 Farm Bill implementation, many producers had to get landowner signatures. Some producers actually have a power of attorney, and if it covers all decisions, they were able to sign for the landowner. You'll just need to check with your FSA office once they're ready to start making these decisions. You'll need to check to see if your current power of attorney is still valid for this decision. Producers will choose between PLC or ARC. This will be a one-time election for the 2018 crop year on each farm with seed cotton base. And if all producers on a farm fail to make a unanimous election for PLC or ARC, the farm will be assumed to choose PLC for seed cotton. Now, just to reiterate, this decision is for the 2018 crop year. Going forward, the 2018 Farm Bill will include the details for this procedure, and we assume that it would work the same. But again, right now you're only making this election for the 2018 crop year. Okay, so the next steps would be to gather similar information used during implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill. Yield records from 2008 to 2012. Planning history from 2009 to 2012. At the appropriate time, check with your local FSA office for additional information. Now, your local FSA office is currently not ready for you to come in and start making these decisions. And FSA has not announced the sign-up date yet, but they have been working on this and they're working out the implementation details, and that should be available soon. So in the meantime, you can check our website, www.cotton.org, for updated information. As I mentioned earlier, we will have the audio of this webinar. We will have the PowerPoint. We have several documents that include the seed cotton program summary, an ARC example. We'll have a document that includes frequently asked questions and answers from all of the webinars. And as we get more information from FSA, we'll continue to post that on the website as well. I want to thank you for participating in the webinar, and thank you for your support of the National Cotton Council. We'll now open up questions via the chat window.
Okay, thank you, Jody. We're looking at a question in regard to converting generic base acres. If the original cotton base was determined when we were planting skip row cotton, and our 2009 through 12 reported acres are from solid row plantings, would a skip row conversion factor be applied to those 19 to 12 acres if we go to option 1 on converting generic base? Okay, the skip row phenomenon is something that is compounding this issue of converting generic base. I believe in this example, and we're waiting to get clarification from FSA on how they're going to handle skip row acres. But if the skip row base, the generic base, and previous to that, the cotton base was determined on a skip row basis, in other words, when it was originally established or updated, and the last time that would have been 2002. So the generic base on the farm is actually a skip row base, and let's assume, I think in this example, I think it was a 2-in-1 skip. Let's assume that. So for every 100 land acres, you have 67 acres of generic or cotton base. So that's going to limit the amount of generic base offices you have, and it'll be less than the land acres. And right now we don't see any option for converting the skip row acres to land acres, but that is something we've got in our request for the next Farm Bill, and we'll see if that's possible. But it would appear for the 18 crop that your maximum skip row generic base is the 67 acres per 100 land acres. So if you've now been planting solid, which is what this question implies, then you'll look at the average cotton plantings on 9 through 12, and remember they can't exceed the generic base. So likely, if you've been planting, if depending on what your land acre cotton acreage plantings are, they will be capped out at the skip row maximum. So you'll likely have, in that example, you would have less generic base than you'll have actual plantings of cotton. If you haven't been planting cotton on the skip row base and you've been planting a number of crops, you may want to look at the 80%. But the point is your generic base is maxed out at the skip row maximum. I know that's confusing, and we're trying to get clarification on that. But that's how we believe it would be implemented. There was another question: are producers still given only the 90-day window from 9 through, even though FSA is not ready? No, the 90-day window that's in the bill, and that would have started, we guess, at February the 9th, is a deadline for USDA to get the bill implemented. That does not imply that would be the sign-up period. We believe that the sign-up period will come later in the year. We haven't gotten any particular dates from FSA, but one would anticipate probably not to have sign-up till in the summer sometimes. So it doesn't. The 90-day window is a directive to USDA to get the bill implemented. It is not a directive as to when the sign-up period would be to get into the seed cotton program or convert to generic base. Another question, are there any tools available to analyze the options? We have not developed any tools yet. We understand that there several of the extension services or extension economists are looking at decision tools. I would point back out right now to those next steps and the things you need to be concentrating on now, even before your FSA office is ready to sign up or start talking to you about the program. You're going to want to know your yield history in 08 through 12, your actual yield history on cotton. Compare that to your countercyclical payment yield. And then you're going to want to know your planting history of program crops on the farm. And I will remind you that it's the total acres of program crops planted to the farm, not necessarily on generic base. So you look at the planted acres of program crops on the farm, and that will help you decide whether you want to take the 80% option, which is option 1, the higher of 9 through 12, or 80%, which is option 1, and the residual being unallocated, or unassigned rather, and then compare that to option 2, which will reallocate the total generic base based on the proportion of program crops planted on the farm. So you can start gathering that information now. Another decision, obviously, is whether you pick PLC or ARC. Jody gave you the relative values for those program options. So those are decisions that are going to need to be made, and then you can start thinking about those now, even before sign-up begins.
And one other thing to add is I do believe during the 14 Farm Bill implementation that FSA sent out a letter that had some of your history on it, and I do think they're going to send that again, so some of your yield history and planted acreage history. But, of course, there will be questions for some that maybe weren't farming the land from 2008 to 2012 or from 2009 to 12. So, again, FSA is working on that information.
I see there's a question about the issue that has presented itself with ARC County issues, particularly the discrepancy of yields, or county yields between counties for ARC. This is something that's going to need to be addressed for the entire ARC program. So if there is a fix for that, it would certainly apply to ARC decisions for seed cotton. But right now, we're not privy to how the ag committees are going to address ARC County, if in fact they can address the problem based on budget exposure. Then there's another question. If there was no cotton acres planted from 09 to 12, giving no available yield history, then can generic base acres still be converted to cotton base acres? Well, the answer to that is yes. In that case, if you wanted to maximize the seed cotton base acres on the farm and you had no history of cotton plantings in 9 to 12, you would take the 80% option.
As long as you planted at least 1 acre of one covered commodity from 2009 to 16.
Yeah, that's right. That's the caveat. You had to be eligible. The base acres had to be eligible to get payments. But as far as establishing seed cotton base, just because you did not plant any cotton in 9 through 12 doesn't mean you're ineligible for seed cotton base. You would want to take the 80% option because that applies regardless of what acreages are planted. Will the decisions on PLC ARC County be allowed to be made one time or annually? Will this change after the 18 Farm Bill? Well, first question, the initial decision on ARC PLC is going to be for the 18 crop. Now, if this Farm Bill gets extended and the 2014 Farm Bill is still in effect after 2018, we would assume that that decision carries over for an extended Farm Bill. The second question, will you get a chance to make a different decision in the 2018 Farm Bill? That's yet to be determined, and then we'll have to see. But I would think that if there's a chance for growers to redecide or to change their decisions for all crop bases, then certainly seed cotton would be among those. But that's yet to be determined in the next Farm Bill. Right now, this program, just so you're not totally confused, only applies to the 2018 crop in the 2014 Farm Bill.
And another question was, will the seed cotton price be posted monthly on the FSA website like other commodities? I would assume that it will be. However, we don't have the details from FSA yet. But the other thing to note is that it wouldn't be posted until we start the 2018-19 crop year. Because right now we're still in the 2017-18 crop year, and that'll run through the end of July. So if they do post it, and I assume they will, I wouldn't think they would start posting until at least the 2018 crop, since seed cotton doesn't apply to the 17 crop. So
maybe Jody just answered this question, but will the payment spreadsheets be calculated year to year to determine the payment rates? That is, in other words, the annual ratio of seed to lint will be used to calculate the weight of seed and lint each year. Now, as Jody mentioned, those numbers are monthly, and we will keep the updated information on our website monthly to give you an idea of what those weights look like. But the only one that really matters is the year average weighting between seed and lint, and that'll determine what weight the lint price is relative to the seed weight, to the seed production. Okay, I see someone else is typing.
And one other thing to note about those weights, they generally will not change a lot from year to year. Of course, we'll use the actual weights for each year, but what will really help determine the change in the formula will be changes in the lint price or the cottonseed price. The weights usually will be fairly steady from year to year.
Okay, we're waiting for additional questions on the chat line. Okay, so the lint price will be the average of New York futures. No, that is not correct. The lint price and the seed price are both NASS, National Ag Statistic prices, and prices received by farmers. The NASS price are calculated based on surveys. The cottonseed prices are calculated based on GIN surveys. GINs out there. It's really important to provide accurate information to NASS because this goes into the program calculation. But they are not futures prices. They are, in effect, supposed to represent cash prices to the producer at the GIN level for seed and at the producer level for producers.
And so just to add to that, if you take a look at the NASS marking your average lint price and the futures price, the basis between those two is generally around 6 to 8 cents. So you can usually take the futures price, subtract off about, let's say, 7 cents, and then that's somewhere generally pretty close to that NASS marking your average lint price.
Okay, another question. Will the payments be subject to sequestration? And the answer is yes. The budget bill did take off sequestration for defense spending, but left it in place for non-defense spending. So for 18, they would be subject to sequestration just like any other payments from the government.
Okay, another question for option 1, will the 20% that's not eligible for a payment stay ineligible for a payment? So It will become unassigned base. FSA has been directed to maintain records of the unassigned base, but the treatment of that base in the next farm bill or future farm bills is still uncertain and will likely depend on budget availability on whether or not that unassigned base would at some point become eligible for a payment.
Okay, a question about the NASS cottonseed price. The question is it a nationwide weighted average for whole cottonseed? And the answer is yes. It is a NASS collects it from all gens, weights it by tonnage, and it is a national average price for whole cottonseed.
Another question, after 2018, will the acres converted to cotton-based acres revert to generic or stay as cotton-based acres? So they will stay as seed cotton-based acres. There will be no acres reverting to generic. After 2018, or starting with 2018, there will be no more generic-based acres.
One point on that is we're trying to get clarification of what happens to generic-based that remains in CRP, and that's a question that we don't have the answer to yet. We know that land coming out of CRP does retain its base acreage, but what happens to base acreage that remains in CRP after 2018, we're trying to figure out what the answer to that. We've posed that question to FSA. Okay, we're waiting for some other questions. Can the unassigned base be planted to program crops and be paid? It can be planted to program crops, but it will not draw any payment. Now, keep in mind, starting with, as Jody just said, starting with the 18 crop, all the base acreage on the farm, including the new seed cotton base, is decoupled from production. So that means no matter what you plant on the farm, whatever crop mix you plant on the farm, or whether you plant any crops on the farm, the payments are calculated on the base acreage for each program crop. So everything becomes decoupled, which means without generic base, there are no coupled payments. So planting, there are no planting requirements, and plantings from 18, and if that continues, that base calculation continues in the next farm bill, and it remains decoupled, there will be no planting. Nothing planted will have an impact on payments.
Okay, another question for 2018. If a grower participates in the STAX program and signs up for PLC or ARC, how is this going to be handled? For 2018, the grower can participate in both STAX and ARC or PLC. So nothing will change for 18. The producer, if he or she is already in STAX, can remain in STAX and then also enroll in PLC or ARC.
But after this crop, then you have to decide STAX or seed cotton. You can't do both. And that's on a farm-by-farm basis, and that's an annual decision you'll have to make. But very good questions we're getting. We really appreciate it. And these, as Jody mentioned, these will go into our frequently asked questions, and the ones that we're unclear about will be posed to FSA, and to make sure that we're providing you accurate information. But those frequently asked questions will appear shortly on our website under the Seed Cotton portal. Yeah, and again, you can go to our website on the URL that's posted in the chat to pull down the presentation and the matrix, which will be very helpful to you. I would point out for those of you that are rejoining this webinar, and we appreciate that. We did provide some new information on this webinar that wasn't on the previous webinars because we had not had time to calculate some ARC examples on how ARC would be implemented. So all the ARC information that you got on this webinar is new information that you previously didn't have on the other webinars. And as Jody said, there'll be some examples on our website, and maybe it'll help you get a clearer picture how ARC will work. We're not seeing any more written questions. Okay, we got one coming in, typing. Okay, we're going to open up the phone lines for anybody that wants to ask an oral question.
The conference is no longer in lecture mode. The conference is no longer in lecture mode.
In the meantime, we'll take some oral questions one at a time if we can. If we got some, and if you're on a cell phone, we'd ask you to mute your phone so we don't have any interference. But in the meantime, we did get a question over the chat line. What will the sequestration be? 18? I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is. We'll have to check on that. But I think it's in the single digits, 6 or 7% maybe. I'm not sure about that. But we'll check on that, and we'll put that in the frequently asked questions.
Yeah, we can update our data.
Are there any oral questions?
2008, 2012. I don't think it's going to be.
I would remind y'all that we can hear all your discussions
probably
now.
That whole 5-year average.
But try to hold down your conversations. It's the only question.
I guess that's a question. Or maybe I should stop it in. Yeah, exactly. That's
Hello?
exactly what I want.
Yeah, go ahead and ask a question.
Will the landowner or the producer get the payment?
The payment goes to the operator of the farm. In other words, whoever shows up to the operator of the farm, if it's a share rent operation between the landlord and the tenant, then it's divided based on the proportional shares. If it's a cash rent, it goes to the tenant, to the operator, just like any other program now. Any other questions over the phone? Okay, we're going to go back into lecture mode here so we can take some more questions over the chat line.
The conference is in lecture mode. The conference is no longer in lecture mode. The conference is in lecture mode.
Okay, so a question comes on updating yields for cotton during 08 through 12. Will that be Olympic average or a 5-year average? It's a simple average, isn't it? Yeah, it's a simple average. Yeah, the answer is that it's a simple average it's 90% of the 08 through 12 yields, not counting any years in which cotton was not planted. So you take the years in which cotton was planted in 8 through 12 and do a simple average and take 90% of that, then you compare that to your current countercyclical payment yield. Okay, so here's another question. For option 1, if a grower has cotton acres for 3 years but had 1 year with no acres of cotton, how will that year with 0 acres be addressed? Well, again, you're going to want to look at option 1 is the higher of 9 through 12 cotton plantings. Now, in this case, you count the 0 years for planted acreage would do, not for yield. Yeah, so you have to look at the 9 through 12 average counting the 0 years, and then you'd want to compare that to 80%. And if you're trying to maximize your seed cotton base, you would take the higher of those two. So it is a little bit confusing. The yield update is 8 through 12, not counting the years that you didn't plant cotton. But when you're looking for the generic base conversion, it is 9 through 12, counting the 0 years, and then you compare that to 80% for option 1 you use that in determining the ratio of program crops planted on the farm to determine how you reallocate your entire generic base. So they are a little bit different. Another question coming in? Oh.
So I had a question. What if you don't plant cotton or don't have cotton every year? And that's very similar to what Craig just went through, but if you don't plant cotton, but as long as you planted, at least 1 acre of one covered commodity from 9 to 16, you would still have the options under option 1 or option 2, and you could still, get 80% of generic base converted to seed cotton base, or you could choose option 2 and just allocate to the crops that you did plant from 2009 to 2012. And then if you don't have cotton in some years, and if that's between your 2009 to 2012 period, you would count the 0 in the average if you didn't plant cotton that year.
Okay, another question. What if you had prevented planting year through 8 through 12? Would they count the prevented? Okay, I think that's a yield question. So if you were prevented from planting, I assume this is a yield question because the 8 through 12 is the yield span, not the planted acre span. There is a plug yield that you can put into your yield calculation, and I believe it's a percentage of the county yield that you can plug your yield in if the actual yield is less. I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is. Do you know? Anyway, there is a plug yield or a de minimis yield that you can put in to the yield calculation, and then you would take that. But I believe if you reported it as prevented planting, it's going to count as considered planted, because then we cross over to the trying to determine the acreage for generic base conversion, which is 9 through 12. Prevented planted is considered planted acres for that purpose. So I'm mixing up yield and generic base conversion, but so that means okay. So I got a clarification. So the question on prevented planting did apply to the generic base calculation in 9 through 12. So I believe the answer is that prevented planting is considered planted for cotton acreage. So if you would have had report prevented planted to the FSA office and would go into whatever the form, I think it's 578 form, I believe. It'll show as planted acreage on the form, and that would go into the 09 through 12 calculation to determine which option you would use under option 1 or option 2.
And under the yield update from 2008 to 12, if a producer has a yield in any of those years that's less than 75% of the average county yield, you can substitute the 75% of the average county yield in the calculation.
So that's the plug yield we were talking about, 75% of the county average. All right, we got another question coming in. These are all very good questions. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to open up the conference lines one more time for any oral questions.
The conference is no longer in lecture mode. The conference is in lecture mode. The conference is no longer in lecture mode.
Okay, both lines are open now for any oral questions. Does anyone have any oral questions over the conference line? One more call for oral questions over the conference line.
You could go back to that.
Would anybody like to go back and look at any of the slides that Jody made a presentation on? We'll offer that to anyone that wants to go back to any particular slide and get a better explanation. All right, we're going to go back into lecture mode here.
The conference is in lecture mode. The conference is no longer in lecture mode. The conference is in lecture mode.
Okay. We had a question. There's a question about farm reconstitutions. That's a very interesting question. When generic base was first introduced in the 2014 Farm Bill, FSA indicated they were going to be fairly strict about allowing reconstitution of farms just for the purpose of moving generic base between farms. Now, I can't tell you how strict or lax any particular FSA office was on recons. Generally speaking, the rule is that farms are recon based on common operation. At some point, the FSAs were encouraging reconcentration of farms under common operation within a county. So I guess the only way I can answer the question is you're going to have to check with your local FSA office at the proper time to see if they will let you recon farms, which in this case would be moving generic base around. But we had been told originally that they were going to be fairly restrictive on reconning farms just for the purpose of shifting generic base. I would think it would have to be under acquisitions or new rental arrangements for common landowners. But again, that's something that you're going to have to check with your local FSA office on how your individual farms are handled. Then there's a question that said if you had no program crops planted between 9 through 12, but you did between 9 and 16, could you still convert generic base acres at 80%? So the answer is yes. In other words, you planted a program crop in this example, at least 1 acre of one program crop in 13 through 16 in this example. So therefore, the unplanted provision, as we're calling it, would not apply, and you would have the 80% option to maximize your seed cotton base, if I understand the question. And other questions being typed in. Okay. If new farms are now rented, who were rented by other farmers in 8 through 12, can we use that farmer's yield on those farms, or would my farm yield be eligible to be transferred over to those farms? Ooh, that's a really good question. We're investigating with FSA on how yields are going to be handled when the current tenant is not the original tenant, or the tenants have changed in the period of yield calculation. One of the questions we need to get clear is, and at the time, RMA was transferring all the RMA yields to FSA, so it is unclear whether those RMA yields are going to be available to FSA if they're from an RMA participant who's not the current tenant. We know that there was procedure in place when yields were updated for the 2014 Farm Bill, excuse me. So we would assume that the same protocol would be in effect for the yield update for seed cotton, but we're going to need clarification from FSA on how they handle RMA yields from other tenants. And we'll have to get some clarification. That's a very good question. And then the follow-up question is, would crop insurance T yields be eligible for transition to seed cotton yields for this base? Well, I would think that T yields would be the yield of last resort, if you will, but we really do need to check to see if the actual RMA yields from the tenant or the FSA yields that were on record from the previous tenant can be used. And all I can tell you is we're just going to have to get some more clarification on yield update as they apply to RMA and FSA yields from tenants who are not on the farm. There should be precedent for this on how FSA handled it at the beginning of the 2014 Farm Bill. We just need to get clarification. And then another question, for those farms now rented which were not rented by the current Farm Bureau during that period of time. Okay, I think that's only part of the question. Well, the rest of the question may be let's see. Okay, they're finishing typing the question. I thought there was probably more to that question. Let's wait and get the full question. I won't try to spec for crop insurance yields. Okay. Well, I go back to my previous answer. We've got to determine whether FSA can access RMA yields from their other tenants, or whether they already have those yields downloaded. Obviously, if they have FSA yields on record from the previous tenants, those would be a source. But again, the RMA yields would be the most relevant yields probably, and we'll just have to wait and see what kind of access the FSA office has to previous tenants' RMA yields, or if they've actually already been downloaded. So those are very good yield questions, and those ones that we're aware of, and we're going to try to get some better answers for you.
And it's quite possible that during the 14 Farm Bill implementation for the other covered commodities that FSA has already been through this and developed a procedure, but we just haven't gotten all the implementation details yet.
Okay, another question is, if someone was growing sugarcane on generic acres in 9 through 12, but during 9 through 16, he did have some soybeans scattered on some of the generic base acres, he does not want to lose all of his generic base acres to unassigned base. Okay, so I think the crux of this question is that in 9 to 16, while the majority of the acres were planted to sugarcane, or maybe all of them were in 9 through 12, but in 13 through 16, they planted soybeans. Since soybeans is a program crop, and since the only thing you have to do to deactivate the unplanted acres is have 1 acre in 1 year between 9 and 16 in a program crop, i.e. soybeans in this case, the unplanted acreage would not kick in, and therefore you would have the options of looking at converting the generic base. Probably in this example, I would think probably to 80% of seed cotton base, since it was primarily a sugarcane and soybean farm. But I would remind you that if there was no program crops planted in 9 through 16, let's say it was all in sugarcane. Sugarcane is not a program crop, and therefore it would be unassigned base. So as long as there's 1 acre of one program crop in that time span, the unplanted acreage does not kick in. Okay. Any other questions? Can you run through an example with a farm with peanut base acres? Okay, we're going to go back to an example. Let's just go back to one that had a peanut base acres.
Okay, example 1.
Okay, we're going to go back to example 1. Give us a second here to all catch up.
Okay, so the question was...
Hang on just a second. Okay. Okay, we're back to example 1. Everybody in sync? All right, here we go. Go ahead, Jody.
We're working on getting in sync. Okay, so the question was to go back to an example with peanut base acres. And what I just want to be clear on
It's for base allocation.
is, sorry, I'm looking at my screen. I haven't got it to go to example 1 yet. It's kind of going haywire, but I'll fix it in just a second. Okay, so the example goes through if a farm has planted peanuts from the 2009 to 2012 period. Okay, so in this example, this is only referring to generic base, and I just want to make sure that we are clear that if the farm had existing peanut base or existing base of any other covered commodity, that this would not change. So your existing base stays the same regardless of what you choose to do on the generic base. Okay, so generic base in this example is 500 acres. Cotton base, or cotton acres planted from 2009 to 2012 would be 300 acres. Corn would be 200 acres. Peanuts is 200 acres. Soybeans is 100 acres.
Okay, I think based on where this question is being asked, I think probably the question deals with the fact that peanuts were not planted on the farm in 9 through 12. And so this example assumes that peanuts were planted in 9 through 12, and so now keep going through the example, Joe. So I go to the calculation. Okay.
Okay, so going back to our example where we walked through the base acreage calculation, so in option 2, you would allocate 500 acres of generic base to the following crops, and that would be cotton, corn, peanuts, and soybeans, because those 4 crops were planted or considered planted from 2009 to 2012. So in our example, you can see each year cotton was planted in 9 to 12, corn was planted in 9 to 12, peanuts, and then soybeans was only planted in 2009 and 2011. So we take the average of each crop across those 4 years. So we have 300 acres of cotton, 200 acres of corn, 200 acres of peanuts, and then 100 acres of soybeans, for a total covered commodities planted of 800 acres. So we determine the allocation percentage. We have 300 divided by 800 for cotton, and that's 0.375, or 37.5% of the acres were planted to cotton from 9 to 12. We do the same for corn, peanuts, and soybeans. So for peanuts, we take 200 divided by the 800 acres of covered commodities, and we have 0.25, or 25% of the acreage was planted to peanuts. So then we take the percentage planted, and we multiply that by the 500 acres of generic base. So you would end up with 187 acres of cotton, 125 acres of corn, 125 acres of peanuts, and 62 acres of soybeans. So if the farm already had existing base, and I'll use peanuts in this example, we would take the existing base and add that 125 additional base to that. So your peanut base would now increase by 125 acres, your corn base would increase by 125, and same for the other crops.
So again, this example applies to to peanut plantings in 9 through 12, not in 13 through 17. So if you didn't have any 9 to 12 history of peanut plantings, even though you'd been planting peanuts on the farm in this farm bill, you would not be able to convert any generic base to peanut base under option 2 because you had no history. That's just to make that clear. Okay, another question says, assuming if planted 100 acres of peanuts for each year during 2 of the 4 years and nothing else, and there is 500 acres of generic base, you were doing option 2, what would you have in base reallocation? Well, the WREC that asked that question, we have to know whether there was peanut plantings in 9 through 12 to be able to reallocate to peanut base or any other program crop base in option 2. If the question on peanut acres planted was in this farm bill and not in the previous farm bill in 9 through 12, then you would not be able to reallocate any of the generic base into peanut base acres. So it only, okay, I'm getting clarification, yes, during 9 through 12. Okay, so if there's peanut plantings in 9 through 12, then you use the proportion in this example that's on the screen right now, and you do the proportionate amount of program crops planted, which in this case would include peanuts, and prorate the generic base using these formulas that are on the screen right now to reallocate your generic base to cotton, peanuts, and any other program crops that was planted on the entire farm in 9 through 12. I hope that clears it up.
And if it was only planted to peanuts from 9 to 12, regardless of whether there were a couple years in there where peanuts weren't planted, the total base, the generic base, would then be converted to peanuts
under option 2.
Under option 2, because it would be 100% of the planted acres were planted to peanuts during that time.
So in that case, if you wanted seed cotton base, you'd have to use option 1.
Yes.
Okay, so that the questioner says, so that would be 500 acres of peanut base if option 2. I guess you're referring to Jody's question, and I think that would be right. In other words, if all the farm was planted in peanuts in 9 through 12, and that was the only program crop that was planted in 9 through 12, and you picked option 2, then 100% of your generic base would get converted to peanut base. The only way you would get seed cotton base would be to take the 80% option and have 20% unassigned. You're welcome. So yeah, I know that the base reallocation questions are coming and are hard to get your arms around, but you really have 2 options to convert it all or the majority of it to seed cotton base, or reallocate it based on the percentage of program crops planted on the entire farm. And this is an FSA farm number by farm number decision.
And the other thing I'll point out is during the 2014 Farm Bill implementation, FSA had some tools available on their website. They have a yield update tool and a base reallocation tool. Those are actually still up there right now, but I would assume that they'll be updating those to apply just to seed cotton as well. So I would think that soon that they would start having those tools updated and available on the website.
But I think studying these examples, we tried to use a set of examples that had every scenario of underplanted cotton acres on the generic base, overplanted acres on the generic base, very few cotton acres planted on the generic base, comparing the option 1 to option 2. Option 1 had some unassigned acres. Option 2 never had unassigned acres because it was just development of a ratio of program crops planted. So I think if you go back and pull down all the examples and apply them to your farm situation, I think it'll be a little bit clearer. At least we hope so. Okay, we're waiting for some additional questions. Well, this has been a very good exercise. We had a large number of participants. We appreciate it. I would add one more note. Many of you know that the Mid-South Gen Show is taking place this Friday and Saturday here in Memphis, and we've been given an opportunity to present another seminar at the Gen Show. It will take place on Friday afternoon, March the 2nd, from 1:15 to 2:15 in the Steamboat Room, which is on the mezzanine level of the Cook Convention Center. So Jody and I will be there. We'll be making this same presentation live, and you'll be able to ask questions. For anybody coming to the Gen Show that would like to hear this presentation again, you're welcome to do so. I got one more question coming in before we sign off. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so we're getting ready to close this webinar. We had a total of 8 webinars from around the Cotton Belt, had good participation. We will continue to use this vehicle as a way of getting words out, so if you have comments, we would appreciate you providing those to your member services staff or here to the office. So we thank you for your participation. And with that, we'll close the webinar. Thank you very much.